Well, good evening, community. Thank each of you for joining us in person and online. Thank you for setting aside time in your evening to be a part of this important event. Thank you also to the members of the Ames Community 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Day Planning Committee for inviting me to participate in this year's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. birthday celebration event. Finally, I know that for some of you, I am standing between your evening meal or favorite television show, or maybe even sporting event or a combination thereof. So I'll jump right into my remarks. As I contemplated how best to express all I wanted to say this evening, I kept coming back to the fact that Dr. King wanted all of us to love this country. He knew that for this to happen, we would have to find a way to also love each other. He knew that to hate was easy, but to love, on the other hand, would take work, commitment, and sacrifice. Now, many of you know that I am not fully myself, absent of my faith in God. Therefore, it is God's heart you will hear from me tonight. If I were to speak from my flesh on this subject, it would cause me to be unlovable. So God graciously has chosen greater for me. Such an attitude and a conviction also guided Dr. King's life. Like Jesus, he was able to stand in this world, withstand man's hatred, and carry out his Father's call on his life. Committing to loving one another is the only way any of us, regardless of our hardships or successes, will ever get through this earthly life. Some may even think at times that the smiling, happy-go-lucky, or happy-go-lucky hugging Jeff Johnson is naive and silent on issues of race, hatred, poverty, police brutality, voter suppression, public education, and other issues here in our own community and nation. But for those who really know me, they know otherwise. You see, I take a God approach to engaging in these life events. God simply delivered truth to whomever he spoke to about social ills of the day. Those encounters, sermons, or conversations, however, were never absent of love. So in keeping with the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee's request, I will speak to the theme, how has Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech impacted my life, and what lessons do I have for youth of today to be inspired to dream? For 4 of the 9.5 years that my wife Peggy and I existed as a married couple in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, to the 5.5 years our family lived in Lawrence, Kansas, to the 3.5 years we lived in Champaign, Illinois, to our now almost 23 years of living here in Ames, Iowa, a framed copy of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, which I received as an undergraduate student during my time at the University of Southern Mississippi, has hung in a public space in each of our homes. One criterion has guided its placement in our home. It must hang in a place where the person who might engage with it is by themselves, and they are not ever questioned on if they saw it or read it. Their hearts or consciences take care of that. What has amazed Peggy and me over these 36 years are the number of folks who have thanked us for making this speech a visible reminder in our home. The speech has allowed us to engage in many thoughtful and open conversations. If any of you have been in our home for any length of time, you know this space is our guest bathroom off of our kitchen. So how has Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech shaped my life? Here are my top 3. First, it clarified the hearts of the adults and my own parents to me. Secondly, it clarified the fact that the man who wrote and delivered this speech was a man of God, filled with faith, and he understood the important role the Black church plays in the community. And thirdly, it allowed me to believe in humanity and what can happen when we are neighborly. So I want you to pause with me for just a moment for a group activity. When certain years as well as certain dates related to our nation's history are communicated, these years or dates bring about similar mental pictures for many of us. As I list a few of these years or dates, let us see how many of these we can connect on. 1776, signing of the Declaration of Independence. 1791, the Bill of Rights ratified by 3/4 of the states. 1861, the Civil War. 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation signed. 1865, Abraham Lincoln assassinated. 1914, World War I. 1939, World War II. 1941, Pearl Harbor bombed. 1963, Dr. King delivered his I Have a Dream speech on the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. But also John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and I, Jeffrey Wayne Johnson, was born in Laurel, Mississippi. I know all of you had that mental picture. Then there are the 9/11 attacks, and most recently, the COVID-19 outbreak of 2019, and then the Capitol riot of January 6, 2020. So as I stated earlier, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech clarified the hearts of adults and my own parents to me. One's childhood is important, as these are the formative years. The life experiences of these early years can positively shape us or negatively scar us. Early on in my childhood, I can remember vividly my father expressing hope for us as his children and our generation. My dad had a saying that some of you have heard me talk about or read some of my writings on it. From early conversations that we had with me, he constantly stated that it was important for me, as the baby of my mom and his 10 children, to live my life from a place of luggage, not baggage. When I was growing up, between 1 and 6, I didn't see the signs that read coloreds or whites only. Plus, conversations about race must have been silenced because I don't remember hearing them. Our elementary school was in our community and located next to a black church. The school was not integrated, and no one talked about why it was not integrated. But our junior high and senior high schools were integrated. My brothers and sisters and I could take any seat on the school bus. White parents, now that I remembered it as I was preparing these remarks, drove their kids to the elementary school. I thought nothing of it in elementary because my dad did the same when situations deemed it necessary. I'll pause here to insert that necessary means that we had one opportunity to miss the bus, and it better not happen again. As my siblings and I got older, we began to realize that much of our rearing was a bit different from that of others in our community. Our parents had elected to believe that America would one day respect and treat blacks and their offsprings as full American citizens. This expressed the baggage of society and our hometown that my father had kept from us. This further exposed the hearts of adults on the issues of race. I later learned that the luggage, not baggage comment was my dad saying it was his responsibility to not burden his children with the cares of the day. He later told us that if we kept our noses clean, held firm to our personal dreams, worked hard, did our schoolwork, treated people right, trusted in God's provisions for us, stayed out of trouble, and not get bogged down with the social ills of the day, we could chart our futures. I was a child. I was part of his hope. I learned later, without my dad telling me, that Dr. King, in a big way, had shaped my dad's thinking and that of many other adults. I also stated earlier in my remarks that Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech shaped my life as it clarified the fact that the man who wrote and delivered that speech was a man of faith, and he was a man of God, and he understood the important role that the Black church plays in community. You see, God, faith, and the Black church were like salt, pepper, and sugar in my upbringing. They weren't just there, they were daily staples. As I got older and learned more about my slave ancestors, I found out God, faith, and a spiritual gathering place was considered staples of early slave life for Blacks in America. Much like Coach T.J. Otzelberger, our current men's basketball coach, says, and I may be paraphrasing, defense travels. But you know, so does God, faith, and the Black church experience. While life in this country was tough for Blacks, simply because they were Black, God, faith, and the church remained their constants. Blacks, me included, also never used religion to disguise or permeate hate. As Dr. King asked in his speech, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. The church for slaves was often a set of designated cabins on the plantations. Slaves also sang hymns in the fields when they gathered before and after hard labor, and even when they were being beaten, raped, or wronged, they consistently prayed to God without ceasing. As their families were separated, sold, and ravaged, again, God, faith, and the church sustained early Blacks in this country. But the church, post-emancipation, became the Black community's country or social club, or their gathering place. If you ever want to understand why we, as Blacks, rely on our churches and ministers, just take a moment to study Black life in American history. But I have some breaking news. Some people and groups are working hard to keep conversations and teachings regarding Black history out of our public schools, and this is also happening near us. So as a Black in the South, and probably other places, my family could not go to any country clubs. We weren't allowed to join social clubs, professional clubs, or even the League of Women Voters. So we dressed up and we went to the church. The church is where we got our information of the day, and we would commune corporately with God. It also allowed us to stay focused on hope when life offered no reason to believe hope was still a viable option. I learned later in my life, while I was pursuing my master's degree in higher education at the University of Kansas, that only 3 occupations in this country made up the early learned societies. These societies were set aside for doctors, lawyers, and clergymen. Early on in this country, Black ministers could not let one know that they could read. Today, the church is still central to Blacks and Black communities. Like with Dr. King, Blacks over the years have looked to ministers. It may be the reason people sometimes don't understand our love for Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Al Sharpton, Bishop T.D. Jakes, to help them make sense of the intersections of faith, social justice, the courts, policing, education, and voting. Finally, the third way Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech has shaped my life is that it allowed me to believe in humanity and what can happen when we are neighborly. Because of slavery, Dr. King, I believe, understood that many whites in America held on to their colonial beliefs that Blacks were savages. Plus, before the Emancipation Proclamation, whites never intended to free slaves. And if they were to be freed, these same whites didn't expect these freed slaves to remain in America or survive on their own. So keep in mind that whites had an immigration or an Ellis Isle story. They came to America just as other immigrants did and still do today, looking for a better life. Some would say because of these factors, Some whites even today refuse to see blacks as truly and fully American citizens. Because of this mentality, this would mean that I and my American-born children are viewed as non-citizens to some whites. But like my dad, Dr. King spoke to being neighborly throughout his life. I have a dream speech. To our young people of today, keep that hope alive. Find faith in something positive. Know that God cares for you. Commune with others and acknowledge all human beings you encounter, regardless of their race, gender, or station in life. And if you really want to make our world kinder, look all human beings in the eye, give them a smile, and then greet them with a hi, a hello, have a good day, etc. These Trinity actions, eye contact, a smile, and a greeting, do not add or subtract 1 second from any of our days. As to the latter point, don't get caught up either in the fact that some people may not acknowledge you back. Own the mental rest that will come to you knowing that you did a good act and you own a clean conscience. So I challenge all of us to examine our cultural biases and stereotypes. All of us should commit ourselves to providing an environment that is as inclusive in every way possible. Our goal should be to create a community where everyone can thrive and survive, not one that causes people to hide and collide. Against the backdrop of the rapid diversification of our world, it is my belief that many of us did not see diversity happening this soon in Iowa or in our nation. In a way, it has snuck up on us. Since the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King's speech, Obama's election, President Trump's one-time presidency, and the insurrection, American citizens, especially blacks and whites, still struggle to talk about race and deal with differences. Many, I believe, even think we can live here together and not actually see each other. Most of our children have shown us how beautiful all of humanity really is. However, make no mistake, many others over the years have been re-entertaining old attempts to desegregate all over again. Dr. King's belief that we are brothers and sisters is still possible to be lived out, and as I said, we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. He later stated, "Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood." We can make the unfinished work of his dream a reality, especially in matters related to voter suppression, white supremacy, hatred, and poverty. Again, Dr. King's faith-filled hope still exists today, even though recent politics and attitudes make this dream a steeper hill to climb. I'll end by sharing that on March 1st of this year, I will turn 59. On August 28th of this year, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech will also turn 59. I have a dream that we will be celebrating the fulfillment of what it means to be true citizens of these United States of America. And so in the words of Lester Holt of NBC Nightly News, take care of yourself and each other, and good night. Thank you.